We thank you for spending your time and coming to our location here at the Ōlelo Studios in Mapunapuna, Honolulu. Today, we will be hearing your heart, your mana'o, your perspective, that our people, the state of Hawaii, may be able to make a more informed decision. We will be having introductions. We'll be giving you 2 minutes. Our questions will be 1 minute. There are times we may increase it. It may be just by a jolt of our timekeeper, but we'll try to stick to the plan so that we can give you that closing time as well. So today, we're going to start with our kane, Mr. Brandon Lee.
Aloha mai kākou.
Aloha.
Mahalo for allowing us this time to come and speak to you folks. My name is Brendan Kaleaina Lee, and I'm running for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs Trustee at Large. My background, my grandmother was the Kupuna founding member of Protect Kaholawe Ohana, and both my parents are former presidents of the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs. I'm the current sitting second vice president for the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs. I'm also the president of the Kamehameha Schools Alumni Association. In 2016, I was elected the chair for the OHA 2016, which drafted a Native Hawaiian Constitution, and as such, I have a proven background for collaborative leadership, and I hope to get your support. Mahalo.
Thank you.
Aloha kākou. Thank you for having me here this evening, and thank you for coming from Waiʻanae. I am Rowena Akana, and I am at present a trustee with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. I am running for re-election this year, and I hope that I will get your votes again. And my experience has been not only with OHA, but I was a teacher, a substitute teacher, counselor at Kapiolani Hospital, and my background is varied from radio, television, counselor, teacher, and trustee. So mahalo again for having me.
Thank you. Esther.
Aloha mai kākou. My name is Esther Kia'aina, and I'm running for the Oahu seat for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. I'm from Nanakuli, Oahu, and I am the daughter of Haunani Anahu of Kalama'ula, Molokai, and Melvin Kia'aina from Kalihi, Oahu. And I am running for OHA trustee because I believe that my 25 years of effective policy experience in Washington, D.C., Hawaii, and the Pacific Islands would be an asset for the Board of Trustees as we face the challenges that we do today. If elected, I believe I commit to first restoring civility to the Board of Trustees in the boardroom. Second, I commit to improving fiscal accountability, transparency, and efficiency. And third, I believe in imposing a term limit on myself, maximum 3-year term limit, to allow for our young leaders to be able to lift up themselves and run for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and other offices in Hawaii. And lastly, the issues that I would focus on would be the protection of our land and resources, and also address affordable housing issues. Thank you so much for the Waiʻanae Coast to be able to give us the opportunity to be heard today.
Aloha kākou. My name is Sarge Davis. I'm running for OHA at Large seat. Why would I be a good candidate? Because I'm born and raised here. My family has been here for 3 or 4 generations. My background is, I really believe strongly in education. Dropping out of high school, I went back, got my GED. I furthered my education by getting my associate, my bachelor's, and 2 master's degrees. I still want to continue with my PhD. Education is very key, but also the haumea, women's rights. We need to empower the woman and to help her in every way possible as a female, and that's how it was in the olden days. But through all the stress and everything, times have changed, but we need to bring that back. So I want to empower young women, keiki to kupuna, in emotional health and different disorders and struggles that they go through, domestic violence, incarceration. These are issues that, you know, people don't see, but it's real. And everyone needs a second chance. That's what I believe. You can always turn your life around. And my goal right here is, do you see this glass half full or is it half empty? If you see it half full, that means you're an optimist, and that you can see the positive in everything. You can see, you know, that things can be turned around and you can make a better life for yourself, and nothing is engraved in stone. You write your own story. Thank you.
Mahalo. Mahalo to the four of you for taking all of your busy schedule to be here this evening. So I'm going to start with the first question, and my first question for each of you folks would be, given the research coming out of scholars at UH Manoa in the last 10 years or more regarding Hawaii's history as an independent state, what do you think is the best thing that OHA can do to promote the truth of Hawaiian history? Starting with you, Esther Kiaina.
Thank you so much for the question. I believe that both, actually OHA and all Hawaiian serving institutions and the general public at large should contribute to that history. I think I'd rather talk at the moment about the various forms of self-determination that our community is exploring, and I believe that OHA is an appropriate entity to help in facilitation, but not in the exploration or formation of a government, whether it be nation within nation, independence, or another form. I support the formation of a Hawaiian government, whether it exists in the state of Hawaii or an independent nation. An independent nation, to me, would not be limited to Native Hawaiians who have grave concerns that we would still have to fight for our rights and land claims even under an independent state, although I believe that it is an appropriate course of action for those who believe in independence.
Rowena?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by the question on Hawaiian history. I mean, we talk about Hawaiian history in many veins. We're talking about going back to the 1893. We talk about Hawaiian studies going back even further than that. So if you could clarify
From 1893.
From 1893. Well, I think that our story has not been told universally the way it should be told. Otherwise, we wouldn't have so much trouble on the continent trying to get recognition as Native people. As you know, Hawaiians are the only Native people that have not been formally recognized by the United States. Alaska Natives and American Natives are. Even the people of Guam and in the South Pacific are recognized. Even though we have at least 125 or more pieces of federal legislation recognizing us, this still is a problem for us. So along with OHA and others, I think we need to do a better job at educating people on the continent and everywhere about our own history. Thank you.
It's interesting because your questions talk specifically about education. And I think OHA can do more to help spread that education. You're correct. Typically, in world history, history is told by the victors, not necessarily by those that were suppressed. So a lot of the new studies that are coming out of University of Hawaii is giving it from the perspective of Native Hawaiians, not from the perspective of the United States, which is what we were all taught when we were growing up. So I think OHA can and should do more to help promote the telling of our history from our viewpoint, not from the viewpoint of the victors who took away our pai'aina away from us. I believe that OHA has done a lot of things, collaborating with Kamehameha schools in that effort, but I do believe that they should and can do more.
Mahalo. And last but not least, Lei?
First off, you know, ho'oponopono, to make things right. We need to make things right. That's why we have been fighting all these years. So to make things right is we need to tell our story, We need to know that our land was taken from us illegally, and there was an apology, but we need to go from there. We haven't solved that issue. It's still unsolved. So how does OHA help in that area? Well, their mission statement is for the well-being of the Hawaiian people. So for our well-being, we need to tell our story. They need to support that. So it goes in a cycle, but OHA should promote anything and everything to make things right for the Hawaiian people.
Thank you. This will be a minute and a half, please. The Waiʻanae Coast is said to have the largest concentration of Native Hawaiians in the world, not just the state, but in the world. As an elective official of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, which is an agency that serves constituents statewide, what kinds of statewide initiatives would you work for to ensure that OHA has a direct and positive impact to the Native Hawaiians, individuals, families, communities along the coast? And how can OHA target resources to these specific regions? Ms. Rowena.
I would target housing. I see housing as the most critical thing facing our people. Not just our people. Housing is critical for everyone who lives in Hawaii these days, but mostly for our Hawaiian people. For many, many years, I've approached Hawaiian homes with a proposal to say lease to OHA lands like you do commercially to other people, and let us build with contractors, private contractors, for rent to own, giving people an opportunity who cannot afford the $400,000 and $300,000 homes to get into a home and pay down their mortgage by renting first. There are many, many opportunities that we could do with collaborating with contractors and people who would join us for tax credits. There are many, many ways to do this. So housing, to me, is the most critical thing facing our people, and this is what I want to work on in the next 4 years. Thank you.
I would say it's going to be a combination of three things. Education, from keiki all the way through secondary and beyond. And beyond doesn't just mean college. College isn't for everyone. There's many trades out there that go to trade schools or become airline pilots or and a lot of them make a lot better living than people that went to college. I agree with Trustee Akana that housing is also very, very important. If you don't have a house, then you don't have some place that the family feels safe to come back to and feel grounded to. And as Native Hawaiian, that's very important to us. And a third would be economic development. All of those things are irrelevant if you cannot continue to sustain yourself economically, to pay for that house, to pay for your kids' education. So all three of those components need to be factored in when looking at sustaining that community to better itself for the future.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've worked in Waiʻanae for 15 years, so I make the drive in every day, 5 days a week for the last 15 years. So I can see why most of the Hawaiians live out there. It's a beautiful area, beautiful view. Yeah, that's true. Housing and education is key, but I think it's the language that makes us who we are. We have to emerge in those Hawaiian immersion schools and charter schools and to teach Hawaiians to speak their own language. That's how we're going to bring us back to where we were. And I mean, there's so many other issues out there, concerns, the homelessness, the drugs, depression, suicide, all of that is as a result, what I believe, because we lost our language. Once we get our language back and we all speak the same language, we can get things done. Thank you.
Thank you, Lane. Master.
I think it's all about equal access to all of the programs available to everyone else, whether it be from OHA, DHL, and all governmental entities. One area that I worked on while I was working in Washington, D.C. had to do with fairness with the Native Hawaiian Education Act, which is a federal act that provides over $30 million annually. And in looking at the awards of the previous year, I found out that there are not a lot of institutions receiving funding in the Waiʻanae Coast, Molokai, and heavily populated Native Hawaiian populations. So I worked with the U.S. Department of Education to fly down here, and we had community meetings in all of these areas. And for that fiscal year, there was a significant increase in funding that went through to these areas. Second, clearly because there is a lot of Hawaiian homelands. I live in Nanakuli, my grandma's homestead. I care about making sure that DHHL does its job. One program that I worked on to make sure that veterans receive home loans was a federal act to allow them that with Senator Akaka. Thank you.
Mahalo.
Thank you.
Mahalo. So my next question for the four of you would be, OHA has a kuleana to improve the conditions of Native Hawaiians in the areas of Aina culture, economic self-efficiency, education, governance, and health. One of the best programs that had benefited our people was Ōlelo Na'oiwi radio program. Many would like to see that program return. Are you aware of it, and what do you think? Start off with Kale Aina.
I am aware of it. I was not aware that it was no longer on the air. So, yeah, if the community's voice says that they want it back, then yeah, then I believe OHA should return it. I used to listen to it at least once a month. I didn't get to listen to it as often as I would like to. But yeah, if that's something that the community wants, then the trustees should listen and use that as part of its platform for advocacy and getting their message out and what they're working on currently. And also it allows the community to come on and tell the trustees what they want us to work on.
Rowena?
Yes. We were told as trustees by staff that the listenership was so low that the staff recommended that the program not be continued, and that's why it stopped, as far as I know. And it was a recommendation by the staff that we no longer fund the program because of listenership.
Esther?
Well, I don't believe that listenership should determine whether a program gets funded. I think we need to look at the overall utility of a program and helping to disseminate our information, including what you talked about with regard to history. So I do believe it is a good idea to reconsider funding it, but I also would say that OHA can't do everything. We need to look at other Native Hawaiian serving institutions who also provide funding, and there's funding at all levels of the government, as well as private sector funding. A benefit to communicate our message, to uplift our people, to educate people is a plus. And by doing that, we educate all of society in Hawaii, and maybe they too will realize that they should also support the program. So I believe that when you're looking at an issue, you can't easily talk about numbers. It's so easy to do that when you're talking about media. In this case, we are at a disadvantage. We need to be on even par with everyone in Hawaii so that we could lift our community up in overall society here in Hawaii.
Thank you. Lei?
Yeah, I just want to say I didn't know we had a radio station, and that might be a reason why we had low listenership, because people didn't know it existed. So if you're going to have a program that is, on the airways and is talking about communication and giving out information and education, you got to let the people know that it exists, for one. And give the people an open forum to talk and say what's on their mind. I mean, you can use that radio station for so many avenues to educate, to inform, to update, to let the people know what's going on. I mean, like, a lot of people I spoke to didn't have any clue as to the water rights issue in Hawaii. And that's really a big concern. So there's so many things that local people need to be educated about. Even myself, I mean, education doesn't stop at the master's level. You're getting educated all your life. Experiences in your life help you and shape you who you are. So I just want to say, like, yeah, I think they should definitely bring it back, but do more programs where they're letting people know, like, we have a radio station, this is it, promote it, it's on this time, during this time, and, you know, on these days, we're going to have open forum and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Lei, I'd like to start with you. I know you ended at this one. Give us some insight about yourself. What actually makes you tick? What is your passion?
I was born with a little alarm clock. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, what makes me tick? I would say finding out how some people get away with stuff and others don't. Injustice, you know, finding out that, you know, why are there more local people in prisons than any other ethnic group? You know, is there racial profiling? Why aren't Hawaiian people more educated? Because we once were in the forefront. I mean, we were like astronomers, we were scientists, we were professors, we were kumuhulas, we are educated. So I think that not knowing that, or just like giving up on ourselves, it's like we need to just come back together as a Hawaiian culture. Because we are great. We are warriors. It's in our DNA. So don't let anybody repress us and put us down. We have to fight for our rights.
Thank you. Esther.
Two things. First, in 1969, when I was 6 years old, I had a sister who passed away. I was sleeping right next to her, and she was 9 years old, and her name was Mamo. And I'm very appreciative of every day that I wake up. And so she brings me inspiration to just love life. Second, my father and my mother instilled strong values, a multitude of values, but the strongest is perseverance. When I went to DC right after college, and I was trying to get a start in Capitol Hill, I ended up being there for 17 years. I called my father crying after reading the Kawaiʻola. And I felt disconnected, and I said, all these things are going on in Hawaii and the federal government. Nobody seems to care about Hawaiians here in DC. And I said, I want to come home. And my father said, Esther, if you don't begin to care, who will ever care? So no, I will not allow you to come home. And he says, please know that even if it's a lonely world, whatever you're doing to help and educate other people in DC on the history of our people and fight for our people, we will be there for you. I ended up having 17 years of working, including with Senator Akaka, to help with the apology resolution, a reconciliation process, fighting for land rights and for programs. And so I need to let you know his vision came true.
Thank you, Esther. Roena.
Well, it's similar. I had a dad who was in the military, and he did everything but blow a whistle where we had to salute. So he always said, you know, Rowena, you can speak pidgin outside the house, but not in the house. And education is very, very important. So he always challenged me to do better. And a B was not good enough. And I never seemed to be able to please him. And so that kept me, you know, trying to do better and challenge myself. And when I went away to school, I wanted to go as far away as I could. So I went to New York. And then I was so homesick. And in the winter, I was in a phone booth calling home. And it was like $10 a minute. And my mother would say, who is this? Sorry, and hang it up. And the operator would say, I'm sorry, we got a disconnect. Can we try again? And I'd say no, because, you know, they just felt, okay, you want to go there, you're going to make the best of it. And that's how you toughen up. And so I guess that's part of my character, and I make the best of it no matter what it is. You know, if I make a bad decision, I live with it. Make a good one, I'm happy.
One thing that makes me tick is fighting for what's right. I already mentioned my grandmother, but more so my parents. Being born and raised in the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs, I grew up in a time where I watched Native Hawaiians debate, not fight, not yell, not argue, but I grew up in a time where I watched Native Hawaiians debate and throw around big ideas like getting Kaho'olawe back from the federal government. In the 70s, that was thought impossible. About revitalizing our language, which in the 70s was thought was impossible. So that's what makes me tick, from becoming a trained parliamentarian because of my background with the civic clubs to help make sure that the minority voice is heard and that everyone has a fair playing ground, to being a steward with the union at IAM, where I work now at Hawaiian Airlines, to make sure that everyone gets a fair shake and everyone's voice gets heard and no one is downtrodden upon and management doesn't have the final say, that it's fair for everyone. And that's what makes me tick every day, to make sure that everyone has a say and everyone has a fair say.
All right, mahalo, folks. My next question for you folks. This question has been asked to me to ask to you folks, and it's a big issue that's divided our lahui. So that question would be, are you for federal recognition or are you against federal recognition? So I'm going to start with Kale'aina.
Oh, so glad you went with me first. So here's the misnomer. Why is it federal recognition or independence? So when I was being raised in the 70s, that's the question that I was always posed. Federal recognition or independence? Why is it one or the other? I don't know. I've now come to learn from my short 49 years here on this planet that it's not one or the other. Federal recognition means that we can get the most funding and the most assistance we can in the system that we currently operate in. Independence means we get our kingdom back and we don't answer to anybody else. So if we get independence tomorrow, federal recognition is irrelevant. If we get federal recognition tomorrow, we get access to trillions of dollars for education, housing, health care for Native Hawaiians. That has no effect on independence. Independence is a separate, independent state of the Kingdom of Hawaii. One has nothing to do with the other. Federal recognition has to do with recognizing us as an indigenous people. Independence means getting our kingdom back. It has nothing to do with being Hawaiian. You did not have to be Hawaiian to be a citizen of the kingdom. American citizens did not overthrow our kingdom. Subjects of the crown overthrew our kingdom. They had American business interests and they were born in the United States, but they were subjects of the crown.
Thank you. That would be Lauren Thurston, right? Rowena?
Well, as a board member, I have supported federal recognition. And the reason I've supported it is because I was the first state sovereignty chair for OHA and commissioned by the legislature to research what would be the best avenue for us. And knowing that we could not just declare ourselves, having only 20% of the population here, declare ourselves independent from the United States. We have no army. Going even to the Hague and to the United Nations, they can declare that what happened to us was illegal. However, there's no army that's going to come and help us to bring back our nation. The way that we can get our nation back and recognition from the United States is to go the federal way. That's the way that I believed was the best way. And that's why I supported it.
Esther?
I agree with Kale'aina that it's not a either or question. Everyone knows that I support the establishment of Hawaiian government, and it's not just to help safeguard all of the programs that exist today, but it's also to provide us an avenue to negotiate with the state and federal government on the disposition of land so that we can have our own land base. With regard to independence, as I stated earlier, independence would never be limited to Native Hawaiians because at the time of the overthrow, it was a multiracial society. So the question would be whether you believe in the occupation theory or want to go through the decolonization process, who would be the eligible voters? Very, very difficult questions. I cannot wait for that because even if that were to happen tomorrow, we would still not have our land base. So again, my position is that I support that, but I also understand why people feel that we were never been treated fairly during the overthrow, during the annexation, and the statehood vote. If people collectively determine that they want to go that route, I'm quite familiar with the decolonization process. The United States is not popular right now in the world, as opposed to 20 years ago when they thought that Cuba might be the country that would put us back on the proposed relisting on the list of non-self-governing territories. It would not be unheard of for a European country to propose that.
And last but not least, Lei.
I think everybody on the panel had a good argument that, doing federal recognition has its pros and cons, and so does being independent. I think let the people choose, let the people vote. Take a vote with every single citizen in the state of Hawaii to put it on the ballot. What do you want, and see what that is, and to educate more people, because I think he had a lot of information about, if we were federally recognized, and Esther had a lot of information about if we were independent. So there's pros and cons, but even Waiʻanae, what she said, the military is removed. So are we we're strategically placed in the Pacific Ocean for, people that want to make threats towards us, right? So in a way, we still need the United States. So it's not an easy answer. And to get the best of both worlds would be good. Isn't that what life is about? Getting the best of both worlds and negotiating. So, hard question.
Mahalo. Mahalo to the four of you. Mahalo.
Thank you. Hawaii, as you mentioned, is the most isolated landmass in the world, yet we're vulnerable in paradise. We are now dealing with impacts of some devastating species, invasive species, meaning we haven't seen the end of it yet, but for example, the cuckoo frogs, the fire ants, rapid OHA death, the glistened vine. What are your thoughts about what we should do about this issue?
Great question, because when I'm talking about protection of land and natural resources, invasive species management is one of the top issues that I think will gravely impact Hawaii, not just with our ecosystem, but economically. I mean, you talk about a koki frog. Wait till a pregnant brown tree snake arrives in Hawaii. Think of a birdless Hawaii and what that would do. So I believe we need to increase our vigilance as a community, but also increase funding. DLNR only gets 1% of our state's budget. Why is that? And of that 1%, we have to fight piddly money. The dollar amount should be $10 to $20 million for invasive species management. And it's not just the ones here, because there's a lot of airplanes and ships. There's invasive species that can transit throughout the region. There is a biosecurity plan for Hawaii, but a biosecurity plan for Micronesia and Hawaii. We need to work together with all the Invasive Species Council, DLNR, Department of Agriculture, all of the federal agencies hold everybody responsible. But first, as individuals and communities, I know Andre Perez is doing a wonderful job behind Leeward Community College trying to fight for the coconut rhinoceros beetle, devastating to not just coconut trees, but for palm trees. So again, community, but the importance is increase in funding.
Thank you. Lei.
I think that since OHA's mission is to take care of the Aina, and these invasive species hurt the Aina, that there should be some kind of, communication or conversation going about how can OHA help to, stop this invasive species going rampant. Or like Esther said, do we need stricter rules? Do we need stricter, You know, like we can't like export the flowers and stuff like that. Everything has to go through, you know, a process. So I think that needs to be, you know, increased. And OHA, maybe that's another avenue or program that OHA can help the community with for the Aina, for our culture.
Mahalo le.
So is this an OHA question or is this a state question? So no, I'm kind of answering with a question. So for everyone out there who's watching today, I'm gonna say that this is a state question. You know, OHA does a very good job right now of putting together a legislative package every year to send staffers to the ledge to testify for things that are important for Native Hawaiians. And this is one of the things that I know that they go and testify for. But this is something that we all need to hold our state representatives accountable for, not just the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Every Native Hawaiian out there. I've been to several candidate forums throughout the last 2 months, and every gubernatorial candidate has spoken about the economic driving force of tourism. Well, if that's the case, which we all know it is, then they absolutely need to be doing more to protect our land and our water from invasive species. Like Esther said, you get a pregnant brown tree snake here, that's gonna adversely affect tourism. If there's no longer birds here in Hawaii, that affects the ecosystem, but it affects our #1 economic driver, which is tourism. So for everybody watching, that's something that you need to hold your representatives, your senators, and our next governor accountable to keep our Aina safe.
Thank you, Brendan. And you are right, that is a question that we have for all panels. It's not just specific for OHA, but we do have it in general as a all. But thank you.
And mahalo for the answers.
Waiʻanae.
So my,
Yes.
oh, sorry, kill my.
Well, they're all correct. I mean, OHA has a legislative package that we put together every year. And Esther's right, and he's right. It is a legislative question. There isn't enough money in the budget for this cause. And I've lived on Guam, so I know about that brown snake. You just need to get one in a wheel well of an airplane that lands here, and that's the end of it. So it isn't just the snake, it's the coqui frog, it's the ants, nobody even knows what's killing the ohia. And so we have such a precious ecosystem, and we're so isolated in the Pacific that more money has to be put into this budget for these kinds of things. And everybody needs to be part of this. Get after your legislators to do that, because nothing is really funded well, especially in this area.
Mahalo. My next question for the four of you would be, pursuant to federal law, surplus lands held by the federal government should be returned to the state as part of the public land trust. Due to infrequent inventories that is a rare occurrence, if elected, what would you do to compel federal agencies to regularly to inventory of surplus lands? And I start with you, Esther.
Well, first of all, I love that question because when I was at OHA and I was the chief advocate, I was advocating for two things at the federal level: for our leaders to be holding them accountable, for the agencies to say, oh, you know, we don't have a clear inventory. Where is everybody? Sleeping, right? Number one. Number two, OHA should get first right of refusal for any state surplus lands. In an ideal world, because all of the federal lands are formally ceded lands, we should be getting that too, but we're not there yet, because we need a governmental entity fight for that on that front. So strong proponent. I can assure you that if I were elected, whoever my staffer is, they're going to work hard, because that's going to be an issue that I believe needs to be enforced. Land is too precious here in Hawaii.
Trustee Akana.
She's right. We need to, you know, she knows all the answers because she worked on the projects for OHA, and she was our lead advocate. And land is what we need, and the ceded lands is what the military occupies. You know, just with a stroke of the pen, it can be transferred to any other state agency. And since OHA is part of a state agency, besides being quasi, those lands with the signature of the governor can be transferred to us, just like that. So it's going to take not just advocacy by OHA, but our Hawaiian people standing beside us when those lands become available to lobby and lobby hard. Thank you.
So 2 things. One, if I were to get in and to advocate for this avenue, the first thing I would do would go to Esther and say, who should we get to work on this? Because no one knows it better than Esther, and that's just a fact. She's done an amazing job all of these years fighting for this very, very issue. And I know that because we've written dozens of resolutions from the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs, and we give them all to Esther. Second, again, this goes back to an OHA question versus a state question. All of these forums that I've been going to, I make sure that I get in a position that I get to ask these candidates a question. And I ask this question of them because I know that it's all being filmed. So whoever gets into office, we have something to hold them accountable to. Well, at such and such forum, when I asked you this question about ceded lands, this is what you said. So where's our ceded lands? Where's our 20% revenue? Where's the push to the federal government to do a proper and regular inventory so that we can get more of our land back?
Thank you. And Lee?
I'm glad I went last. Everybody's correct. I mean, how would I push that? It's like, how difficult? No more excuses. Stop making excuses. It's like, how difficult is it to produce a piece of paper of the inventory? It had to exist at one time. So if you don't have that original document, then let's start fresh. Let's start with what we know and move from there. But something has to happen. You know, like no more excuses. Just we gotta get it done, and it has to be, whether it's just one area of land or a parcel of land. We just, you know, like they said, a lot of it is on military land. Let's get an inventory of all the military land where the military are. That's an inventory, you know. But I think we need to start, just do something, and then it evolves on its own. But not to do anything would be an atrocity to the Hawaiian Native people. You know, we can't just sit around anymore and say they didn't get the memo or they're not responding. OHA has the funds and the means to get the action done. We have to do it. No more excuses.
Thank you. I think we're gonna, I believe this may be one of the last questions, so I'm gonna, and it may be a good segue to your closing also. And I'm gonna start with you, Brendan. What qualifies or distinguishes you, and I think we may have heard it throughout the panel, what qualifies or distinguishes you from the other candidates seeking this office?
I think what distinguishes me, well, I don't think there's anyone running who's not qualified. You know, if you're, in my eyes, if you're a Native Hawaiian and you're passionate about what's good for our people, that qualifies you to be a trustee. But what distinguishes me, I think, is my background with the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs. You know, it's the largest grassroots organization for Native Hawaiians throughout the entire country. The association is built on process, it operates on process. OHA is built on process, OHA operates on process. I think I've proven myself as a collaborator, someone that works collaboratively through the OHA, where we were successful for the first time of Native Hawaiians coming together and dealing with the issue that we talked about earlier, federal recognition versus independence, whatever that means to you, and producing something meaningful out of it. It wasn't just a month-long shouting match. People came together and debated and listened, and that was the thing that I was the most proud of, that Native Hawaiians came together from their different political ideologies and listened to each other. Why is this important to you? And thank you for listening to why it's important to me. So now let's come together and see what is common among all of us so that we can fight for the same thing.
Thank you.
Okay.
We've just been flagged that we've got 5 minutes. I'd like to give you the opportunity to do your closing. And that will be 1 minute closing, starting with you, Lei.
Okay. I think that you're running for OHA. You're running for Oahu, right? Right. So there's 3 people up here. So here it is. We're the 3. I think I would be good for the job because of my life experiences, because of my mental health background, because of all the psychology classes I've taken, because of like how you see the glass, half empty, half full. We all know what the problem is, but the problem is we have to flip it and look for solutions. We have to be solution focused. The focus is to find solutions to the issues, not just regurgitate the same issues over and over. So, you know, Hawaiians need to move forward into the 21st century and become more solution focused. Focus on solutions, and solutions will appear.
Thank you. Esther.
Thank you.
Again, my name is Esther Kia Aina. I'm running for the Oahu seat for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Accountability through voting is probably one of the most important tools for our community, so I urge you to vote. OHA is facing some challenging times, and with Supreme Court Justice Kennedy's resignation, I'm very concerned about the sustainability of the existence of OHA, Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and federal and state programs for Native Hawaiians. I am a fighter. I have a proven record of 25 years of fighting internally within the state of Hawaii and the federal government. Please consider me when you go to the ballot box and vote Esther Kia Aina for the Oahu trustee seat.
Rowena.
I want to thank you again. Of course, I'm Rowena Akana. I've been with OHA many years, and I think I'm qualified because I have the historical memory. When I went to OHA, OHA had only $11 million. I was one of the trustees who negotiated the settlement for $129 million. We grew it to $400 million. I've been part of every program that OHA has had, including housing, health, education, and I intend to work for a housing program that I think Hawaiians will be proud of. I've been outspoken, as many of my followers know. Many times I'm the lone voice at OHA, and everyone knows that I'm a fighter. So when you go to the polls this November or in August 1st, remember, tell your ohana to vote Akana.
Aloha, I want to thank again you folks for having us today. My name is Brendan Kaleaina Lee. I'm running for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs Trustee at Large. Two things. I want to remind everyone out there that everyone can vote for OHA. So remember that everyone can vote for OHA. And the second thing I want everyone out there to remember, pay attention to what everyone says and listen to what you believe in. The next trustees that are elected in are going to be tasked with coming up with a new strategic plan. So think carefully of who you want working on that plan. Mahalo.
All right, so with that being said, Esther Kia Aina, Trustee Akana Kaleaina Lee, and Tita Lea, mahalo nui for joining us this evening for our 2018 Waiʻanae Coast Candidate Forum. We hope the best for you folks. Kuli'e kanu'u and lohi kikai kikai. Mahalo everybody. Aloha.
And welcome back. This was a very interesting panel with some changes in the discussion. Welcome to the program. Why don't you introduce yourself? People are already sick and tired of me. Go ahead.
I'm Julie Kachola. I'm a lifelong resident of Waiʻanae. And I'm a land use planner, and I used to be on the neighborhood board. I just got off, though. But yes, it was a very interesting discussion.
Yeah. Have you noticed any changes? What distinguishes the candidates or the panel itself?
I mean, there was, as we were just discussing, major change in the whole push for sovereignty and recognition when you come up with two different focus where you can go for federal recognition and independence at the same time being exclusive, that concept. And then it seemed like, I guess, Brendan started it, and other people were saying, hey, that sounds right, that sounds good. I mean...
I think it showed some progression.
Yes.
Because Brandon was very clear that recently he has come to the realization that the or conjunction that separates people is not appropriate, and that you can have an and conjunction, although he didn't put it that way.
Right, right.
And sometimes when we look back at history, our history, which includes U.S. history, Abraham Lincoln said, "A nation divided against itself cannot stand."
Right.
And yet we have been divided between independence issues or federal recognition, and that or conjunction has split us.
Split us.
And so
right.
Brandon raised it, and then Esther came in and agreed that the and conjunction would be more appropriate. And so I saw that shifting and an acknowledgement, and even I think to a certain extent, Rowena Akana had addressed that, but finding that federal recognition was more appropriate because it at least opened the doors to millions of dollars.
Yeah. And the land, and yes.
Yeah, but to a certain extent, it also sells out for many people who were independent-minded.
I mean, it's a game changer, really, if you look at the and versus the or. And so we don't have anything left to divide us. We can just move forward.
We can unite as a people.
What a concept.
Yeah. I think one thing that continues to divide us is what I heard at the very end, the encouragement that, remember, everyone can vote.
Oh, yeah.
For the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, the Howlers, the Japanese, the Chinese, the Portuguese.
Yeah.
But you know who cannot vote?
Tell us who can't vote.
The Hawaiian Nationals.
That's incredible, right? I do see that.
And,
now
and
that you
it's
pointed out.
discriminatory. Who are the Hawaiian Nationals? Those are people who say that understanding my history, I cannot accept American citizenship. It was imposed upon us in 1900, the Organic Act. And yet the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says no government has a right to arbitrarily remove one's nationality or impose a nationality. So those who are saying, I am a Hawaiian national, my nation is Hawaii, I cannot accept American citizenship. And yet, for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and all other governmental affairs, we are marginalized. We are pushed to the margins, and we are not allowed to be a central part
That's interesting.
of the government.
Yes, yes.
So as a result, when they encourage people, Hawaiians vote,
Yeah.
some of us are saying, well, we cannot.
Oh, wow.
You know, I cannot even register to vote because I refuse to say that I am a U.S. citizen.
It's the first time thank you for bringing that.
Driver's license, the same thing. They're stopping us from getting a driver's license unless we say we're U.S. citizens. Now, when I go for employment, although I'm getting kind of old for employment, and after I go to the human resource director, and then they say, okay, sign this statement that you are a U.S. citizen or permitted to work in the United States. What do I say?
Oh, interesting.
I don't need your permission. I've been here. I'm an indigenous person. And yet we are marginalized from even the job market because of this mentality.
Interesting.
So there's discrimination in Hawaii.
Oh, I work for the state, and you have to take a state oath, definitely. But this is something. I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing about this. But I was doing this panel last election, 2 years ago, and to me there was another big difference that I'd like to bring out. I thought last time, it was very contentious, even within the candidates. But this year, the panels that I heard today didn't have that. I thought they were more progressive in terms of working together, cooperatively. They could disagree and share different opinions, but I got the sense of that desire to work together for a better solution. And along with that, I heard about the importance of communication and outreach. And the recognition that maybe we're ready to talk story. Like, open up the forums, let's see what happens. Instead of only talking when we've got federal hearings or that kind of other kind of forum staged by somebody else. What if we just start being able to open that forum within ourselves, in the community and bring these issues to fore.
There was a program that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs had sponsored, a radio show.
Right.
And there was some question about why was it canceled and the need for public education. And yet I think Rowena came out with an excellent explanation.
It was saying, your
staff recommended it, but they said that it wasn't worth the cost. So it's not a question of whether or not communication is important. It's a question of how much will it cost, and at times it takes what is called the Arbitron rating.
And Esther's saying it's precisely because there's low viewership that you need to have this. That's not the reason to cancel it. It's the reason why you need to actually promote it. And I think Lei was also saying that maybe people didn't know about it. That you have to get that promotion out so that people know that this exists, this, what time, when, but to try and promote it out, because this could be a vehicle for education and
I think they
conveying
need
the
to
platform.
also to take a look at the administration of the program. Because if you have OHA with a deep pocket and with these publicity issues, you can charge to the hilt as long as they're willing to pay. Kamehameha School is another one with a reputation that they might be willing to pay because they have deep pockets. So it's a matter of administrative control rather than the necessity for the program.
So I'm just hoping they can work all that administrative stuff out, because what I heard was getting that message out is important again. And I saw that kind of cooperative, kind of working attitude that, we need to progress and move forward. And then with the split on the the federal and recognition and independence, that is a concept for us to move forward with, I think, The other thing I thought was interesting is I heard a different kind of passion, a passion about coming back to culture, about home. There was about language, about finding the cultural roots of, as Hawaiians, we need to be able to go home to some place and have that identity. And that was with the previous panel, but I thought it kind of came out. So not to just get stuck in the administrative part of the job, but also to bring those cultural roots. I mean, that's something that we need to, I think, do at the same time.
To a certain extent, the question of what makes you tick in this panel also addressed that issue of how do you identify yourself? And I thought Esther, when she came out and talked about family, very important.
Yes, very important.
Yeah.
It was very personal.
Yeah.
And I felt that. Yeah. It was a good reveal, I think, for everybody to talk about what motivates them, what are they passionate about, what gets them out of bed and makes them want to be a leader and to kind of move history forward at this time. Generally speaking, they were I think educated and knowledgeable, these candidates. Generally speaking,
Yeah. I'm not impressed with the education aspect unless it's not good enough just to talk about my education.
Right.
So what are you going to do with it? What do you advocate for? What are your passions? Where do you want to go?
Do you understand issues? Do you understand that, where we are?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there was some differences in that, but I feel like we've got, good potential candidates.
I was disappointed that they didn't ask the question of this panel as to the OHA audit, which was asked of the earlier panels. And I'm concerned about some of the earlier panels being asked certain questions, and
that was, I think,
questions are not necessarily consistent with
supposed to be
all
consistent.
of the panels. I had expected that.
Yeah. I think we had a communication. I had come up with there was another list of questions that came in, and I think they just jumped the gun on that. But apologize for that. It should have been the same set.
Yeah. Okay, so we had Brandon, is it Brandon Lee, yeah? Rowena Akana. I think Rowena Akana distinguished herself by the fact that she had been with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs for many years. And I don't know if
institutional knowledge.
Yeah, institutional knowledge. I don't know if that's positive or negative.
Right,
because the institution, and she has been very much involved in the various affrays that occurred in the institution. And yet she has that background, so you cannot deny that. And I liked what she said when she said, I've made my decisions. Some have been bad and some have been good, and I have to stand for the decisions. That's true. But you have to also be willing to say what was the bad one.
Yeah, well, and also to make sure that, it's just not on a wing and a prairie. It's like you have to, do your research and have, some basis for those decisions, which I'm sure she did.
And it's interesting to see a new personality with Esther Kia Aina coming back to Hawaii, and she's been a point of a lot of controversy with the Department of Interior rulemaking and the rest. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the election comes out. We've been given the 1 minute sign.
She's been playing with, the big boys, and she knows the system not only at the federal level, which is to me
Yeah.
a foreign thing, but it's also at the state level when
Yeah.
she was at.
I think they're giving us a sign to wrap up. This is a wrap up sign.
There's
Oh,
telling
that's
us
to continue.
Go, yeah.
Okay, you're right.
So, of course, that knowledge base that she comes with, and that she comes from the coast.
Right.
Her parents live in Nanakuli on the homestead land. I mean, that's all good.
And yet there was a recognition among the panelists that we need to also consider the inclusion of not only the Native Hawaiians in some of the policies. So there's at least that recognition, especially when you deal with the question of independence. And I think Esther was very appropriate to point out that to a certain extent, we can talk about land rights belonging to the indigenous people, the Native Hawaiians. But when you deal with independence, what about the rest of the people, and to what extent do they have the right to vote?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. These are important, understanding. It reflects that kind of understanding of the issues, really, because they're complex, and we have people that's been dealing with it. I think they've been educated on these.
Many of our organizations for the last 30 years, you've been involved with Kalahui Hawaii, which was one of the questions. Is it only for the Poe Hawaii, or what about the rest of the people? In the Hawaiian convention we have had, we said essentially the same thing. We should come out with two proposals, one for federal recognition, one for independence. And when you deal with the independence question, you have to address the question of who do you include?
Yeah.
You cannot exclude those, but what about including? But do you include everyone? Simply because they live in Hawaii for 1 year, do you include the military to participate as they did in the so-called statehood vote? But finally, I think they're getting closer to looking at these issues.
Yeah, we are. I think it'll come up, and we'll be able to discuss it and just make an informed decision. That's the main thing, not rushing stuff.
This brings us to the end of this panel review for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Do you see any change in the sort of the direction or movement, Hawaiian movements, based on having reviewed so many different candidates for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs?
Yeah, I think they're coming in with a lot better understanding on the independence and sovereignty issue, which
which has divided
our
people for a long time.
So that's a good thing. And in addition to everything else, the issues, I mean, they started off with education, housing, the economy, some basic issues, which is fine, but the fact that they showed that they did understand their complexity of what we're working on
Okay.
with sovereignty and our
Thank you, Julie,
history.
for joining us and helping us close this program.